There we go. All right, cool. Now let me make sure that it is. Okay, good. Hello, everybody. How's it going? Let me just host one more link so I can get everybody in here. All smooth like and everything. There we go. Okay, cool. That should work. Now let me just double check to see if this thing is up and running. Turn the sound off so I don't hear an echo. Okay. Is it going live? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. I don't know if people are hearing me. Let me see. If you're in the live chat and you don't hear me, let me know. Put something in the chat so I know, because it looks like on my end. Oh, okay, good. All right, so the sound is on. Good. Okay, good. Hey, Star Dancer, how are you? Oh, okay, good. All right, all right. Okay, so I posted the link in Discord, and I also invited Animist. I haven't heard from him lately, so I don't know if he'll show up tonight. Let me see. And Shane Fairbanks is here, calling me Baldy. What's up with that? Man, you got to check your hair privilege. Running around, keeping your head warm, not worrying about your ears freezing. Man, you people in your hair privilege, you need to check your hair privilege. Us bald people gotta survive through life without hair. It's rough, rough. Sure, we save money on haircuts, shampoo, conditioner, other hair products, but we don't have that flowing mane. We don't have that acceptance of other people with hair that you people with hair have. You hair people. You need to check your hair privilege. All right, so let's see. I posted in Discord. So it looks like I got everybody. Looks like I sent everything out. Cool. Okay. Just need a head. No, I don't need a head mitten. I need other people who have hair privilege to check their privilege and just understand how privileged they are. They need to feel guilty unnecessarily, unnecessarily, and just check their hair privilege. They were born with hair. Let me see. I'm arguing with a flat earther on Twitter. Why are you arguing with a flat earther? This should be the extent of your argument, Shane. The earth is not flat. The other person says, bullshit, the earth is flat. And you say, it's not flat, you fucking idiot. And then that's it. That's the end of the conversation. You can't convince anybody of anything. It's just the way it is. You can tell people, but yeah, I don't think anybody's ever been convinced of anything. I am absolutely convinced of that. Nobody changes their mind just because somebody provides them evidence. They actually have to change their mind. How's it going, Leon?
Good.
Good.
Sorry I'm a bit late.
No, don't worry about it. It's an open invite. Anybody can come in as soon as they want. And I'm not going to be charging my Patreons for September, so you shouldn't be charged.
Oh, I just got paid today.
Oh, awesome. Well, good for you. But
Like
so yeah, so because I didn't put out a video for September because I've been
mhm.
so slow. I've been so lazy. So you shouldn't I didn't put it through because I have to like post something and then that charges people. So you shouldn't be charged for this month because it wouldn't be fair because I didn't put out any videos for this month or last month, September.
I went ahead and switched to monthly instead of by video.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah,
So
that's fine. Yeah. Whatever works for you. And I think you upped your donation too, right?
I think I'm a double. Where's the heating level?
Yeah.
Uh,
We'll double check it because I know you signed up for the $1 level and I noticed you
I'm
you
on
bumped
the
it up to three.
I think I'm on fifth. I think
Hmm.
I'm on $3. So it's at a heating or a double.
Okay.
Double.
Well, cool. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah. So next month, hopefully I'll be putting out a video, and so then people will hopefully then uh, people will get charged for it. But I'm not going to do it this last month. Speaking of
Um,
which, the reason why I have been putting out videos consistently lately is I switched jobs. I left my old position. I moved into a new position, and I've been transitioning into that. And so my life has just been chaotic this past month. So,
that's
so that,
understandable.
yeah. So I apologize to all of you for not putting that because I was at least trying to put out a video every week. But I work full time and changing
Hey,
jobs has just been one of those things.
Loudon, I've been
Mhm.
thinking if
Okay.
if the metaphysical stars align for since my um Sal Salwin or Salhain.
You're asking me how
Um,
it's pronounced?
yeah, let's just get that out of the table right now.
Sure, sure, no problem. So I was taught Samhain is Irish Gaelic, and
Mhm.
Samhain. Uh, let's see, Yeah, Samhain. It's there's not so much an ow in it. It's like Samhain.
Mhm.
That's how you pronounce it in Irish Gaelic, but obviously Americans we kind of butcher it a little bit and call it Samhain or Samhain.
It's it's
Yeah, in
it's
in in
that's
Gaelic,
how you pronounce it in
in
Irish Gaelic.
Gaelic it means we kind of butchered a little bit and call end of summer, and also it's the name of the calendar month for November because the 1st of November is Samhain. It's not October 31st. It was the first, and then obviously the Catholic Church threw in All Saints Day, and that's why we have All Hallows Eve, which is the evening before All Saints Day. And
Let me check
All Hallows Eve is how we get Halloween.
my calendar real quick. Um, Ironically, all Halloween falls on a Wednesday. I was thinking if the stars align, we could have our usual suspects join the hangout and have a little party because
Hmm.
trick or treating is all but dead around here. So
Yeah, that's a good idea, Leon. We'll have to check
I
in with
know
other people, see what
I
they
know
think of
y'all
it.
probably have ritual for Halloween or for Halloween stuff like that, but
Yeah,
um,
I kind of feel bad about that because I no longer have a coven. I'm covenless, so I used to celebrate with my coven, and it's one of those celebrations that I mean, yes, you can celebrate it by yourself, but I don't know. To me, it just seems kind of it's missing something. I actually prefer to celebrate it with other people.
um, back to real quick on the Halloween. It's written Sam Hain. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the way
mhm. Yeah,
it's.
Irish Gaelic, it's spelled Samhain.
Mhm.
In Scots, in the Scottish form of it, it's Samhuinn, and then Shit. And then in Welsh, there's another spelling of it too, which is completely different. But off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. If it's Calingriff. But yeah, so there's various spellings of it, and then it comes, if at least the the P Celtic. No, P Celtic is the Welsh. The Q Celtic, which is Irish Gaelic and Scottish, comes from the root of it is Samonios, which is the old Gaelic spelling for the end of summer, which is essentially what Samhain, Samhain means. But the root of it is the end of summer. So you had, essentially, you could cut the, like if you look at the traditional wheel of the year that you see up, sure, okay, cool. There's a half of it which is the summer half, and then there's the other half which is the winter half. And Beltane, at least in the northern hemisphere, marks the end of summer, the end of winter, beginning of summer, and then Samhain marks the end of summer, the beginning of winter. And an old there's like an alternate name for the month of May in Irish Gaelic, which actually translates to end of winter, which is interesting.
How weird would our year be if if we went back to the old calendar where Samhain was technically our New Year's Eve?
Well, Leon, that's a strong theory, but we really don't have like strong evidence to say that that was considered to be the new year. But it's a good possibility. But
I
go ahead.
understand that'd be a weird transition if we had to go back to that.
Yeah. Well, April Fool's Day comes about because that was the New Year's. April 1st was the New Year's, and then when we changed over to the Gregorian calendar, we made Juno, the month of Juno, which is January, the first of the year. And then people who still celebrated the old calendar, so that the April 1st was the New Year, were considered to be foolish, and they were the stupid bumpkins, and that's how we got April Fool's Day. So in one calendar, I forget exactly which one, and I don't want to give you the wrong information, but April Fool's Day was the first of the year, and then we changed it at I forget exactly when we changed it over to the month of Juno, which is January.
I believe what I've been told is the Julian calendar and transition to Gregorian.
Oh, you know what? You might be right. I think you're right. Yeah, it's the Julian calendar. Yeah, I think you're right.
For the longest time term, when I was in high school, when I first took it into Wicked, I was for the longest time thought that Halloween was Halloween fell on October 31st and not November 1st. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, in at least in Gardner's form of witchcraft, it was there was the four major fire festivals of November 1st, February 1st, May 1st, and then August 1st. So.
And now I think when I saw the Wheel of the Year on Google, it's a lot of I think it's the especially the spots fall on the 19th through 21st, when the equinoxes are.
Yeah, so you have the four major fire festivals, which is Samhain and Bulk, Beltane, Lunasa, and the good way to remember those is Sibl, Sybil. So you remember Samhain and Bulk, Beltane, Lunasa, and then later on at some point they included to solstices and the equinoxes. And they didn't have a name. They weren't called Litha, Mabon, Yule, and what's the other one? That's the other one.
I can't help you.
Can't can't help you.
Ostara.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Ostara. So Yule and Ostara was taken from the northern tribes. Those names, Mabon and Litha, I believe, were just added on. But in the on the continent, at least in England, they didn't call those celebrations any name. It was just the equinoxes and the solstices. And then later on, as as paganism spread and people got into Wicca, and they started adding names to stuff and giving names. And I mean, most notably is Aidan Kelly, who introduced Mabon, or not really introduced it, but started calling it that because he liked having all those having a name, and he was looking at the mythology, and he saw the character of Maponios or Mapon, and included it in Mabon because he saw similarities in the season to that particular mythological cycle, which is not too bad. But I'm just a very traditionalist, so I still call them the equinoxes and solstices. I don't call them Litha, Mabon, Ostara, or Yule. Yule is actually the name of the month in the northern tribes, and I'm sure Animus probably knows more about that than I do. But and Yule is a wonderful celebration, but it wasn't really native to the quote unquote Celts, and even the Celts are not all that native to England.
As someone who came from a Christian background, I will forever find it hilarious that the celebrations of Christmas is entirely 100% unquestioned, and even to this day, completely pagan.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was. There's a trip up in the language when people say things that are pagan. The only way that something is pagan is if it's not Christian. So back then, everyone was pagan. They were pre-Christian. That's what those cultures were. They were before Christianity. Christianity gave the name of pagans. Like if you were an idolater or heathen, you weren't part of the Christian culture, you were considered to be pagan. And obviously pagan has roots going back in Roman times of the peasantry. They're considered the country bumpkins, but that term became identified with people who were not Christian. So anybody who is not Christian essentially is pagan. But like if you go back to, let's say, the 1st century AD, in what in the Middle East, I mean, there was no pagan cultures. You had this culture and that culture and the other culture. Nobody called themselves pagan. They called themselves by their culture. The Sumerians, Sumerians was way before this, but the Sumerians called themselves the Sumerians. Babylonians called themselves the Babylonians. The Iberians called themselves the Iberians. So what I think Christianity did, as it evolved, because it did evolve over a period of time, they began to adopt mythologies, and then Jesus, I'm sure, got mixed up with the cult of Mithras, and possibly even Horus and some other mythologies, and I'm sure that the stories of Jesus and the various things that he was supposed to have done got tacked on, and just sort of, because you have to think about it. Back then there were no books, there was no Google Maps, there was no, you didn't Google stuff. Everything was word of mouth, and you saw people practicing stuff, and you just started to do it, and you didn't know if what you were practicing was an amalgamation of this culture's practice and that culture's practice mixed in with your form of Christianity, because the people, like, the next 300 miles away from you, they probably celebrate, their form of Christianity different than you practice it, so almost everybody was illiterate back then, except for very extremely wealthy people, who wrote. So everything was, you just saw somebody practicing something and you sort of adopted it,
It's an excuse to add another party to your local calendar.
Yeah, exactly, right. But yeah, so I mean, it's
the guys over there have this other holiday. Let's do that one too.
well, or maybe that's the one that your parents did, or your grandparents, or your friends, or whatever did, because Christianity was a cult that was suppressed by the cultures at the time, and it took a while for it to really grow and take a foothold in the culture. But as soon as Rome, which kind of Rome had the control of that whole Roman Empire, the whole boundaries of the Roman Empire back then. Once Rome adopted it as their quote unquote official religion, what was his name? Constantine. Then it just spread, but before that, it was just another cult. There was like the cult of Mithras. There's the cult of the Christians, So how's it going, Animist?
Oh, hey there. Sound check. Am I coming through okay? Is the wiring still working?
Yeah, I don't hear you, Animist.
Can you hear me now? I'm in a new state, a new time zone. All the wiring had to move 1,000 miles. It's bloody hot. It's bloody hot here. I'm waiting for whatever they call winter in South Carolina to show up.
Well,
me too.
The winters in South Carolina are not going to be like the winters where you were from.
Yeah, but I'm hoping I can at least go out during the daytime for long enough to walk through the woods.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
But this is where I've been sent. So whatever I'm going to do here is what I'm going to do here.
Nice. Well, your wiring doesn't sound like it's thousands of miles away.
Okay, that's all. That's good, because some settling of contents may occur during shipping and handling.
Well, it's interesting. Everybody's been going through change. You moved, I changed jobs, and
yeah, it's one of those years.
Yeah, which is good. I'm excited about. I'm excited about my new job, but it's just been taking a lot of my energy lately.
Oh yeah, because you're having to set up all new conditions.
Yeah.
Lots of magic. Do lots of magic.
Yeah. But actually, the company that I'm working for is really awesome. I mean, I can't go into any details, but maybe at some later point I will. But essentially, I'm still working in the nonprofit sector, but I'm just working for a different company that does different things. But how was your move?
It was quick, and basically it was just a matter of going somewhere hotter. I mean, I got on an airplane for the first time in 35 plus years, and it was pretty much like I talked about airplanes before. It was a bus that tilted. I mean, I got in it, and it started going down the road, and then it tilted and it went up in the air, and it was actually a really good day to fly. So we went like a bat out of hell over the Appalachians and dropped down into the eastern seaboard. And here I am. An awful lot of my physical stuff is still back in the northern Midwest, but it's nothing I can't live without. It's all in storage. Mm-hmm. And I was coming to a place. I'm with family again for the first time in a while. And so there was already, kitchen stuff to use and furniture. So it's all very comfortable. It was just very quick.
Nice.
Yeah. So
now, if you don't mind me asking, did you have to move, or was it just like a voluntary choice, or what's the story behind it?
Well, it's a combination of things. I mean, I was done with my work up there that I had been doing, metaphysically. But also, none of us are getting any younger, and so.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure none of us are getting any younger.
Okay.
my left ankle says it's definitely not getting any younger. But it was a chance to spend time with my mom and one of my sisters and her kids and family. And I assume that the rest of the job will show up appropriately once I'm able to go out and get out in the woods. And and this is good space for me. This is it's adjacent to Cherokee country, so I'm looking forward to meeting some of those folks eventually when I can go outside. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that. And one of my old shaman friends just lives across the state boundary off in the other in Georgia, so I'm hoping to get in touch with him again.
Nice.
And yeah, maybe we can get together, make reality melt a little bit once again like we used to. Life gets weird when you get multiples of us together. So, I'm trying to accentuate the positive. Obviously, any big transition like that has got its stresses.
Yeah.
We're having a good time. I'm cooking some good food. I made a lot of homemade dishes that some people have never had before. I actually met some relatives from the new generation that I'd never really met before. So, at this point, I'm not complaining, except about the heat. But I planned for complaining about the heat. That's a plan. Because, oh my goodness, it's still 90 degrees and 90% humidity in the Carolinas right now.
Yeah, it's real muggy down there.
Yeah. And even though we haven't had any real rain since I got here, really, for 10 days. We haven't, there was 2 hurricanes, and then there's been no real rain since then, and everything's still a little bit soggy. But one of my sisters gave me a rundown of some of the local poisonous creatures, snakes, scorpions, strange bugs and stuff.
Do they have scorpions in South Carolina?
She says they have scorpions.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought they were really more of a Western thing, but apparently
I thought so too. Yeah, because I know they have them in parts of Texas, real bad like that. They have these little blue scorpions, especially in in various parts of Texas. So,
yeah, I don't know how populated they are, but apparently they do exist. And then and there's the usual run of things that live in warm climates, poisonous snakes or venomous snakes and spiders and blah blah. It's nothing categorically that I haven't dealt with before, but you gotta go do your homework and study what you need to not let drop on your head or clamp onto what not to let clamp onto your hand when you're out in the woods.
Right.
So I've got a little homework to do so I don't touch the wrong thing. But there's a little blue lizard that comes and visits the house every day in the afternoon. So I've said hi to him. And there's some eagles that fly around the neighborhood. And I'm out in the country again. I'm not in a major metropolis, so that feels good. There's lots of woods and hills and streams and stuff.
Yeah, you seem like the type of person who prefers like being kind of away from other people and just sort of off in the middle of the forest on your own.
Yeah, well, that's inherently part of the thing.
I'm too much of a city rat. I mean, I've lived in cities my entire life, though I do love it when I have the opportunity to actually go up to Yosemite and just relax there for a while, recharge my batteries, which I haven't done this year. I need to do it before it gets too fucking cold. Yeah,
the nighttime in those dry countries. Dry areas can get pretty brutal. That temperature really drops when the sun goes down.
Yeah, and Yosemite is just getting so crowded with people nowadays too. So it's actually kind of nice to go around this time of year, because when it starts getting colder, when it starts hitting towards the winter time, not too many people go up to Yosemite. They prefer to like go off, skiing over in Tahoe or whatever.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things when I lived in California. It's like you could stay down in the lower elevation and have a mild winter, or you could go visit the snow where the snow was up in the elevations. That was an interesting way to think of weather for me, having grown up thinking of weather as north to south, east to west. And then when I was in California, you thought of weather in terms of up and down. And so it became a 3-dimensional thing. So that was kind of a cool, and I was in Redding, about 150 miles north of you, and you could go visit the snow if you wanted to. You could stay down in the valley and kind of look up at Mount Shasta or Lassen or something like that, and go, "Hey, look, there's the snow. Should we go see it?" Nah, let's not go see it.
Yeah. Well, I used to live in L.A., Burbank area, Southern California, and I hated it. I really did. I really don't like Southern California. I much prefer middle California and Northern California where I live now. It's much cooler, and I mean, I just also didn't like, Los Angeles and the whole Burbank area. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, that's what we would call not a very pagan area. That's very San Francisco is a metropolis, but it's still very hippie.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, and then obviously, of course, I work in the middle of very the progressive part of San Francisco. Where we have Google and YouTube, and I mean, but I can walk down the street to Twitter. So, so.
Oh yeah, that's Techland where you are, isn't it? It's They run all the internet companies out of there because the weather is almost perfect. Almost.
Yeah, but it's really cool because they kind of adopted some of the Google's like Google has just a kind of way of doing employee, I don't know how you call it, but doing business for employees. Like there's areas where they kind of have like like a meditation room, and then they also kind of they have like little play areas for their employees, and you can take your work home with you. And so the company I'm working for now, they sort of adopted some of those things. So we have like a little room where you can go and meditate and go to sleep if you want. And I can take home my laptop, and so it's really different from my other job before. It's very interesting. And I have I work with people who have genderless names. They prefer to be called MX, and they, them, their. So I gotta get used to that.
Yeah, that works up to a point. I still haven't sorted out what the hell non-binary means, but I trust people that they know what they're talking about.
I don't, I mean, to me, sorry, Leon, just 1 second. But to me, I really don't care as long as somebody's like polite about it. Like if I tell somebody I prefer to be called this, then, that's okay. But if they like make a mistake, whatever, I'm not going to jump down their throat. I'm just going to say, oh, I prefer to be called this. And I don't mind. It doesn't take any more energy from me. It doesn't take anything from me. I don't mind addressing people however they prefer to be addressed, So what were you going to say, Leon?
I still have trouble with the pronouns, even though I'm doing my absolute best. Like with, I have several people who prefer on Twitter who prefer to be called them and such, rather with the pronoun. Mm-hmm. And I will admit, even I've been barked at a couple times because I got it wrong. So I just try to stay neutral in the whole thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I prefer to just call people by their first name because then you really don't have to trip up about it. But when you're talking about them in the third person, sometimes it can be difficult because you want to refer to he or she, and instead you have to refer to they, but in the way that somebody's not saying, but in such a way that people aren't like assuming you're talking about like a different group of people. You're actually talking about an individual, but you're talking about an individual in the plural. So you just have to be careful with your language, and I don't mind it. It just takes a little more thinking on my part.
Yeah, in English, we either have one pronoun too many or one pronoun too few. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, okay, if we had a neutral pronoun, if we had a neutral singular pronoun, whatever singular them would be, that would be fine. Or if we had three pronouns, people could pick the one that doesn't mean one or the other. So I imagine somewhere 100 years down the line, some pronoun will evolve for third person singular indifferent. But
Yeah. I mean, I think it will. I mean, I'm just glad that English doesn't have like, like in French. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like in French, German, and Spanish, everything is gendered. So
Yeah.
you have something that is male, then you have some that are female. So it's like all of those pronouns are, or excuse me, a lot of those words are gendered. Like you have, I can't think of an example right now, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
oh yeah, uh, and sometimes it's really hilarious. Like in Spanish, which is where I know the most specifics, the word egg is male.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, which is.
the single most feminine thing possible uses the pronoun L. It's like there is no worse grammatical confusion than saying El huevo, which is the word for the egg, because it's the one thing that you absolutely positively know came from a biological female and it's a male word. And
Yeah, exactly. A rooster didn't shit out that egg.
exactly. And the funny thing is, I've told that joke to people who were native Spanish speakers, and it was literally the first time in their life, 30, 40 years old, and it had never occurred to them that was an ironic thing.
Hmm.
They just grow up intuitively knowing that these words have their pronoun, and that's how they use it, or it has its article, L or la, and they don't really think of it as a real gender. It's just the thing you put with that word.
Hmm.
And so when I told them about that, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. That is really silly. Where did it, how did that get into because it got into the language thousands of years ago." And likewise, depending on which language it is, like in Greek, a word that ends in A is male and the word that ends in O is female. And in the Latin languages, it's the other way around.
Hmm.
And, for native speakers, it doesn't give them any trouble and they just don't think about it. But when you're learning it as a second or third language or whatever, it kind of makes you go, "Oh, this is kind of confusing, guys. Can you agree on this? Can we pick a letter?"
Like with
Yeah.
the first time I heard about this, my friend who's full blood German, it blew my ever-loving mind. And it took her 2 to 3 times throughout various talks for me finally grasp it.
Hmm.
Like, wait, there's a female word and a male word. I think my brain exploded at that point. Like, I had to end the call early just so I can process what the hell I just heard.
Yeah. That's why I prefer to just know people's first name, because then I can just address them by their name, which is just a lot easier for me. Um, you know, so that's just what I'd prefer to do. But sometimes you have to address them as they, he, she, whatever. You know, so. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just started there, so I mean, I'll have to get used to it, But it's not a big deal. I mean, I've encountered that before. I've worked with people you know, uh, who prefer who are biologically male, but they identify as female. They're transgender or transsexual. So usually, then okay, that person prefers to be called she, and you just know. So you don't have to worry about it. But having somebody who doesn't identify with the gender, that's just a little different. That I just have to get used to.
Yeah, some of it I just let people know not to expect me to keep track of, because I just play I'm an old guy who talks to squirrels, and I'm lucky to keep track of whose faces are whose. Don't expect me to remember a pronoun for you, because I won't. I'll be lucky to, it takes me 5 seconds to recognize people I know. As far as I'm concerned, you're all humans. So I'm just outside of that issue.
Now, how about squirrels? How do they be preferred to be called by rodent, or what are their pronouns? How do they like to be addressed?
Well, see, the thing is between. No, that's a legitimate question. Believe it or not, that's a legitimate, because between me and them, they're a squirrel, and I'm a human being. And that's the extent of the differentiation that's necessary. I don't need to keep track of which squirrel is male or female. That's their problem. And honestly, that's their internal issue to work out.
That's you let them work. That's a whole internal squirrel. They have got a whole HR department to deal with that aspect of the whole squirrel nation.
Yeah, well, obviously that's an issue for them. That they have their own relationships to work out. But I deal with them categorically as squirrels, and some of them I know are female or I know are male because of certain behavior patterns or morphology or how big they are. Or, in the springtime, some of them are obviously lactating, but that's not my problem. That's their problem. That's them working within their own species. And honestly, I pretty much deal with humans the same way.
Are squirrels mammals?
Yeah, they're mammals.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're furry. The fur is the dead giveaway.
Is it?
Yeah. Almost all the furry things are mammals, and almost all the mammals are furry things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few exceptions where it's like, is that like platypuses? Is that a mammal?
Well, a platypus is like its own. It's like its own category.
Right, exactly. They're not exactly furry, and they don't do the mammal thing in quite the same way because they've been around so long. They kind of predate the real difference between mammals and non-mammals. Mm-hmm. But yeah, other than that, for pretty much, if you see a coat of fur, you're looking at a mammal. Okay. But that's pretty much the thing.
That's a good generalization to follow.
Yeah,
if it has fur, it's a mammal.
Yeah, pretty much.
But wait a second, whales don't have fur.
Right, so that's a thing, but they're in the water.
Yeah, okay. It's kind of a general, if it's on land and has fur, probably it's a mammal.
Right. If it's in the water and it has to breathe, it's probably a mammal too. Because no, it's a good thing. If it because there's a lot of mammals in the water that don't have fur, but they still have to breathe. So then that's usually when you're dealing with mammals in the water, because everything else in the water just breathes water. Mm-hmm. All the fish and crustaceans and stuff, they don't have to come up for air. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you got it. If it's on land and it's got fur, it's probably a mammal. And nice. If it's in the water and has to come up for air, it's probably a mammal. Because because amphibians like frogs, they can stay underwater for months and months at a time, as long as it's cold enough. Mm-hmm. As long as their metabolism is slow enough, they can stay underwater pretty much indefinitely and just absorb oxygen through their skin. But in the summer, they still got to come up for air. But that's the thing. And amphibians are curious creatures. But anyway, so I tend to deal with humans the same way I deal with any other species, which is something that maybe only shamanists get to do. Maybe only shamanists get to do. It's like, okay, you're the humans. These are the other species, and I'm going to help you relate to the other species. It's the kind of magic we do. Mm-hmm. Because I can't keep track. And I've been in environments, situations, and jobs where I never did know the physical, genetic, or preferred gender of some of the people I dealt with in that environment. And I didn't care. I just deal with them as individuals. And some of them changed their gender identity or physicality over that time. And I also didn't care. But I just treated them as individuals. And they seemed fine with that. They seemed fine with the fact that I just dealt with them as an individual, and they had their own little subculture issues with these labels.
Yeah. Well, that's actually what I prefer to do. I prefer, when I'm dealing with people, I will deal with people as individuals rather than groups. Because right now it seems like everybody deals with groups. Like, you're in this group, you're in that group, and these people are in that group and this group. And it's like, it's very tribalistic. It's like everybody has their own groups. And I just break it down to this. If you're an asshole, I don't want to deal with you. If you're a decent person, I'll deal with you. Other than that, I really don't care. I don't care what you identify as. I don't care what your pronouns are. I really don't care. But if you're an asshole, then I care. And then I don't want to deal with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of that is an option you develop with age.
Mm-hmm. Well, I pretty much had this outlook all my entire life. I mean, I've always dealt with various circles of people, but I only deal with the people who are decent human beings in each one of these circles, because everybody in whatever circle you're in, there's assholes and then there's decent people. And you just kind of like learn, okay, that guy's a fucking asshole. I don't want to deal with him. That lady over there, she's cool. I'll deal with her. I'm not going to like, I'm not going to put up with the nonsense or people who are assholes.
Yeah, and as long as everyone sees you applying that across the board, for the most part, nobody can take offense at it, and they don't, because they see you're just dealing with people as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But I think as you get older, people expect you to stop keeping track of these little fads. They're like, okay, he's at a point where he can't keep track of fashion anymore. Just leave him alone.
Yeah, it's. I think I'm getting to that age where you stop like really caring about fashion. So you're kind of like pulling clothes out of your closet that you've had for years, and maybe other people see you as kind of like dressing like I probably still dress like I did in the early 2000s. I don't know what era you would call that, but or maybe even the late the late 1990s. But I don't really care. It's just I feel comfortable wearing those clothes, but people probably look at me like I'm an old hipster or a old doofus or whatever for wearing those clothes.
Right. Where I think if you were wearing really like this season's latest fashions and using this season's latest slang, they would expect you to use this season's latest subculture labels.
Yeah.
But once they see you've gotten to the point where you don't give a shit anymore, they kind of quit having that expectation of you. Mm-hmm. As long as you're treating everyone even-handedly, like, it's good enough for him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's quit playing the game, and I never did play the game because I was always moved around a lot. And like I said, I've kind of got the autism card of, you're all just humans. You're lucky I can remember what you said yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so I just...
Yeah, it's really funny. It's like, going back to the point before of some people are assholes and some people are not assholes. It's like everybody right now, I notice it's actually in social media. I don't really notice it out like, in my real life, but I notice it in social media very much that it's like once somebody is identified as a certain thing, or once somebody sort of sides with something, all of a sudden they get tacked on everything else. So you can no longer, for example, you can no longer have a view where you're pro-life and not get assumed that you're also all these other things, So
oh, yeah.
it's really interesting the way that that social media culture works, because I know that there are people out in this world who have various opinions about individual things. I know that just because they're, let's say they're pro gay marriage, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're also, whatever. It's just that that's their opinion on that particular thing.
Yeah. No one expects a gay activist to be economically conservative.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Wait, how can you be pro gay marriage and then also think that we should have tax breaks for the middle class? What are you, crazy?
Right, exactly. And yet I've known plenty of people like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Leon.
And people tend to speak in generalities. It's simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree with you, Leon. Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's just easier to assume that, okay, everybody in category A is this way, everybody in categories B is this way, and so on. So they stop looking at individuals as individuals, and instead they look at them as groups. And now I notice in social media, especially, that people they'll put you in a box. They're like, okay, you are this way, you think this way, so we're going to slap you and throw you into this box. And then like people are sitting there going, wait a second, why am I in this box with this person? I don't agree with this person on anything,
right.
But
or
somehow,
on any other issue. Yeah,
right? Yeah,
it's
one
thing.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's just crazy.
I think it just proves that, life is more complicated than most people can cope with. So,
Yeah.
the fact that they can sort A from B is already as much as they're capable of.
Right, exactly. It's like, well, they don't agree with me on this, so they must be that, It's crazy.
Yeah, it's because there's no IQ test for entrance to the internet, just like there's no sanity test for entrance to the internet.
I think we should. I think we should pass that law. Like you have to have an IQ this high to get onto the internet.
Oh, I'll be screwed.
You'll be screwed. We'll make an exception for you, Leon.
Sorry, I'm so quiet. I'm doing a reading right now.
That's
Also,
okay.
if you are experiencing terror, I would like some advice, please.
I'm sorry, what?
If you're experiencing tarot, the meaning, I'd like some advice, perhaps.
I could try. I don't really do a lot of tarot. I'm not a tarot reader. I'm familiar with the Rider-Waite deck. I'm familiar with the history of tarot, but I'll try to help you. What's the question?
A bit of backstory. My current Dungeons and Dragons group is disbanding in 2 weeks after the session. And I asked the deck a very basic question: if I should continue playing Dungeons and Dragons, because when I first started playing D&D, I was very introverted. Some of my friends even call me a hermit. And I've actually become more out of my shell because of it. In fact, if it was for D&D, I wouldn't be in a call right now. I'd be in chat. So I'm at the deck where I should continue my therapy, as I call it. And 3 cards I drew were the Queen of Pentacles, 6 of Pentacles, and Justice.
So what's your question?
My question is, should I continue playing D&D? Should I continue my therapy? Because I use D&D as therapy for my autism, my autistic Asperger's.
Wow, that's a really good question, Leon, but I'm not qualified to answer that. I think that you should consult somebody who's familiar with your situation and what's going on with you, in particular a professional, and ask them that question, that advice. I really don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't deal with I don't deal in that realm of so I really don't know what to tell you on that. I would seek professional help, like somebody. When I mean professional, is somebody who's familiar with your situation and what's going on, and talk to them about it. Because some things can be beneficial for us depending upon who we are, and some things can be counterproductive to us. And I'm just not qualified. I'm just not the right person to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you had a tarot question.
As a tarot witch, even though I've been told not to, I do sometimes consult the cards for advice. Not future advice, but advice about certain aspects. Like, if it worked for a tarot reading, when I first started reading, I would even go on to Brady.
So maybe this will help you, Leon. I'm not, like, I don't consider myself to be a tarot reader. I don't do it professionally. I don't do it for a living. I consider the tarot and any form of divination to be a way to access questions that a person may have about things. However, the answer or the lack thereof you should not put a lot of weight on that. You should use it in such a way that it maybe gives you a little bit of guidance, or maybe it leads to some kind of an insight. I believe that any form of divination is based upon what you already think about a situation to begin with, but it's not quite at the conscious level. It's still sort of a subconscious level. So you, like, let's say you have a yes or no question. You kind of already in the back of your mind have yes, like you already sort of are convinced of that, but maybe you're looking for kind of like something to sort of put you over the edge to convince you of such. And so you may use tarot to do that, to get an insight into a situation, but don't put too much weight in. Don't put too much emphasis on what those cards tell you. Use it as just a little bit of guidance, just maybe a little bit of nudge, because essentially, like I said before, you're tapping into what you already feel about a particular situation to begin with. Does that make sense?
I
Now
would see it
now that's not how a lot of people view tarot. It's how I view it. I have a much more
stable.
practical. Yeah, I have a much more practical way of approaching any form of divination or any form of meditation or any form of ritual. I have a very I don't know. The best way to describe it is just sort of a more practical approach to things, you know. So I don't know if that helps you.
In terms of magical path, tarot was the easiest for me to cling to.
Mm-hmm.
I tried ritualistic. I tried various other paths. Tarot, like I said, I'm like you. I'm kind of lazy. So tarot for me was one the easiest way I could still stay in a closet and practice without the minimum of effort.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I have the four quarters here represented of the aces.
Mm-hmm.
When I tried ritualistic, calm reporters, calm reward lady, I used the aces as representatives. Turns out I had difficulty raising energy, calling the circle and stuff, because every time I try, I feel silly and it just clashes. And I'll leave feeling worse. If that makes sense.
So do I give the good advice or the bad advice in that situation?
Any advice to help.
Hellbound's aware that my tradition does a lot more risky activities, and
yeah,
so
sometimes he's crazy. Just kidding.
No, we are infamously a little bit nutty because we'll say dive down the rabbit hole on purpose and see where it goes, But you're also supposed to keep track of the fact that you've dived down a rabbit hole and remember where you dived down from. And so when you get done, like dive down the rabbit hole. This is true of magic in all ways, actually. To some extent, you dive down the rabbit hole and you see where it goes and what you can learn and what kind of connections you can make. But then you have to remember that you went down a rabbit hole and go back out and say, okay, what did that teach me about myself and the things I'm connected to? You can't stay down there forever, or you cease to be able to communicate with other people. So, excuse me. A lot of doing magic is just being able to maintain the difference, to say just boldly go where no one has gone before, but realize that's what you're doing and that's what you did, and you're doing it for the experience of doing that, and not hopefully keeping your identity in the details of what you found down there in Wonderland. Hopefully at some point you back up and go, wow, that was a trip through Wonderland. What did that teach me? And a lot of the early stuff you go through as you're developing a magical practice is really about that. It's like, okay, let's say I'm going to invoke a spirit or something like that, or do a ritual or do a divination. So you do it. And while you're doing it, you commit to it completely for the duration. And then you come back And all of the magical rituals and even the shamanic stuff is you have a period of coming back from that journey where you go, okay, let's come back to normal reality where other people live and see what we learned from that. Because if you stay down there, you'll just keep getting more and more twisty until you no longer make sense. And then you're of no use to anybody, including yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said before, I mean, it's actually kind of nice that you have Animist and myself here, because I think that Animist and I are we both are achieving the same thing, or maybe we both have the same goals in our general approach to things, but he and I approach it from completely different aspects. So he's going to give you a very I don't want to. You can chime in and change it however you want, Animus, because I don't want to misrepresent you. But he has a very esoteric way of approaching things, and a very metaphorical, very shamanistic approach to things, and a very, very elusive way of going about things. And I'm a very much practical, kind of down to earth, sort of, kind of, stick in the mud, sort of. So it's a nice balance. So you have sort of like you can kind of take my opinion about it, you can take his opinion of it, and sort of blend the two, or maybe favor one over the other, or whatever. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I think you nailed it pretty well. I think the shamanistic practices are very immersive.
Mm-hmm.
They're very immersive. I mean, you really go for the ride, even if it's dangerous. And we're the first ones to say, hey, what we do is dangerous. You shouldn't probably do it as immersively as we do unless you were raised this way, or unless you're, it's like, okay, the people who are experienced at it are going to go completely insane now. Don't try to do that right out of the gate. Whereas the ritual people tend to do things sort of step by step and keep finding their anchor again each step along the way. And it's just there's a matter of taste, and there's a matter of personality type, and there's a matter of culture. So, because when I'm talking, you're talking to someone who, like, we're the people who do the kind of magic practices that I do things like, stone lodge, where you sit or ice lodge, where you sit and either sweat or freeze until you're on the verge of physical breakdown, to see what that does to the way your mind works, and have some kind of vision as a result. And that's not recommended for everybody, and you could die. whereas people from what I still kind of think of as the Golden Dawn tradition, the sort of intellectualized, magical, ritual, symbolic tradition, which the tarot's part of, they tend to want to go step by step and make sure they haven't gone crazy on every step, and that they're still doing rational things in a rational world every part of the way. And everybody does a little bit of a blend of the two, but you got to find the place where you're functional and your comfort zone is.
Like, for example, whenever I try to call the spirit, or the Lord, as it were, I always feel in the back of my brain that this is silly, and I guess I'm too earthy. I guess you would say I'm too grounded in reality for me to just let go of my let's just put this, let go of my restraint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the best advice that I give, or the advice that I feel is best that I give to people whenever they talk to me about, like getting into ritual, or getting into witchcraft, or getting into magic, or whatever it is that essentially they're looking, they're just sort of exploring what appeals to them. Spend some time with yourself, spend some time with what you believe, spend some time with how you approach what you think about. life? What do you think about death? What do you think about how do you look at the interconnectivity of human beings? How do you look at our relationship to the universe? How do you look at our relationship with the earth? How do you look at your relationship with yourself and your family and your friends? You know, there's, in my opinion, you have to sort of, you kind of have to find a little bit of yourself to find that greater path. It's sort of, you kind of look inward to find outward. It's kind of like that sense of, as above, so below. It's kind of like you're looking inside of yourself to kind of give you an answer of the wider universe. That's kind of like the way that I approach it. So if you're doing something, you feel silly about it, that, to me, that sounds like there's something in the back of your mind that says, this is not right. This is not fitting for me. So, if you're approaching whatever you're doing in ritual, whatever it is that you're wishing to attain, maybe you're just trying to become more comfortable being in that atmosphere. But if you don't have it grounded in yourself, and you don't have it grounded in something, it's not going to mean anything to you, because the whole idea of ritual is a symbolic communication. It's a symbolic it's a symbolic mythology of what's going on. If you look at any ritual, that's what it is. If you look at the Christian Mass, for example, the Christian Mass is a representation of the coming together of the community for a meal, and that meal happens to be the sacrifice, which is the communal sacrifice. That is the basic thing that the hunter do. The hunters gather together, they killed the animal, they now go about, in a sense, worshiping that animal and thanking it for giving them life. And when they take that food and they understand that that animal sacrificed itself for them. And to me, I see, even though Christians would completely deny this, but I see a parallel in that with the whole Catholic Mass. It's kind of like Jesus died for their sins, and now they're consuming his flesh and his blood, but he sacrificed himself for them. I mean, I know it's kind of abstract, but do you see the connection that I made there?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, so ritual has to mean something to you. If ritual doesn't mean anything to you, yeah, you're going to feel silly doing it. That's why I kind of feel like when people go out and they buy a book by Silver Ravenwolf or Scott Cunningham, and they kind of go through the motions and they do the ritual, and then they feel like, oh, well, this is silly. Why am I doing this? Because you don't have a connection to what you're doing. You don't have you don't have that connection. It has to have some kind of a meaning or a purpose to you, because you're essentially just kind of, you're putting on someone else's, I'm talking in metaphors here, so I apologize, but in a sense, you're putting on someone else's clothes and expecting them to fit, and they don't fit for you because these aren't your clothes. These are someone else's clothes. Do you understand that metaphor?
Yes, but
okay.
If I may.
Sure, go ahead.
In my grimoire, Book of Shadows, whatever, my recent one, I meant that book to be entirely tarot. That was my record book. I want my readings and such, history of my history of tarot. But over time, it slowly transitioned into a general Book of Shadows, and I feel when I'm writing in it, even if it's absolute nonsense, I feel at peace when I do it. So that does sound weird, doesn't it? Like writing in it, I feel more calm than I do with a full-blown altar ritual.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, writing is a very in a sense, is a very magical act. I mean, speaking is a very magical act, because what you're doing is you're taking an abstract concept and you're essentially creating it. Like once you write the word squirrel, for example, everybody who understands that those characters that you put on that paper will know that that's a squirrel. And so you can take that and write it down and give it to someone else. And all of a sudden now they completely understand what that concept is. You've given them that concept. You've passed it along. And it's the same thing if you write out a whole sentence. If you write out like a quote from somebody, or you write out a poem, or you write out anything and you give it to someone else, they then take that in, and they understand what you're saying. They have a sense of connecting with you in that sense, because now you both know what that concept is. And it's the same thing with language. Like if I tell you fountain, you have an idea and a concept of what a fountain is. So it's very important also that we don't confuse certain words, because then it just confuses people. But it's the same thing. It's a magical act. So if you feel comfortable writing in your grimoire, Book of Shadows, maybe, yeah. I mean, I can understand that, because what you're doing is you're kind of taking your thoughts and your ideas and you're putting them down. You're in a sense, you're creating your reality by writing things down. You're actually bending and shaping reality by doing that, if that makes sense.
It does. So I'll be more like a scribe witch then.
I don't know. I think people get too caught up in these names. Like people want to be called a chaos witch or do candle magic, or they have all these categories that they want to break it down to. You are using what you have available to you to do whatever it is that you do. You don't have to call yourself a water witch or a fire witch or an earth witch or a writing witch or a tarot witch or whatever. You're using whatever tools you have around you that you have available to do whatever it is that you want to do. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So if you feel comfortable and you feel a connection with the tarot, then go ahead and work with that. If that's comfortable for you, and maybe something will develop from that. But I mean, my own personal opinion, obviously you can do whatever you want, Leon, because this is your path. But I would narrow it down and say that you're a tarot witch. I think that you're just, you're exploring what it is that you're exploring, and you're using tarot to find that, But that's just my personal opinion. I mean, you can do whatever the fuck you want, So
Yeah, from a developmental, first I agree with all that. I think you covered that really well. But I think in terms of developing your practice and yourself and your consciousness, is one thing that you can do is, since you have this tool that you've got some talent with, is explore it, see how far it goes, see how much it can show you how you're connected to things, and see how specific and real a result you can get from it. Because if you're like, okay, let's say like some of your magical facilities are developed up to level 3 out of 10, just randomly. But because of your natural talent, your tarot is 6 out of 10. Well, if you push the boundaries of your tarot abilities, within common sense, and see if you can go from 6 to 8, then it may be easier to do the things that aren't as natural for you. Instead of at 3, maybe you can do them at 5, and that may get them high enough that you can then use some of your other skills or some of your other things that don't come so naturally. Maybe some of those things can start to produce some results for you. By getting to a higher level of mastery of what you're already good at, you may find that some of the other techniques of magic start to be meaningful or more meaningful for you, and then they'll feel less silly because you'll already be so good at getting into a thing that you can get into those things better too, and you'll see how those things can connect you to the environment. I think that's something that new practitioners should really do a lot of, is, if you're good at a certain thing, go for it, see how far it'll go, and then see what else will go how far along that same path. And it's okay to be not as good at other things, as long as you're getting better at something, it'll drag some of the other techniques along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those other techniques then may open up whole new avenues of exploration.
Yeah.
That does
Yeah,
make
and
sense. Sorry.
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
I've always had a thing for writing. Ever since I was a little kid, hell, back to D&D, I have a whole flash drive full of D&D characters I wrote backstories for. So language, and even though like fear, them, there, those are lost to me. I'll never match with them. But language itself, writing, hell, for Fallout 4, I've already written out in my head a backstory for my character.
Mm-hmm.
And progression throughout the game, continuation of the story. Story, to me, interesting. So, that's just, I guess that's my skill.
Yeah, and I mean, go ahead, Animus.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, stories help create worlds, and they help create connections to the world. So, I mean, that's why people have always told stories. Stories create an environment where you can imagine things being connected to each other, and that gives you a general foundation of connectedness. And so then those stories can spread off to other parts of your life. So I think that's a valuable exercise. People who keep dream journals and diaries, that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah.
Is they're writing their own story, and that helps them see the connections that they wouldn't have seen if they didn't write it down.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a great deal of I think there's a lot of benefit from storytelling. I think that's one of the things that we've been moving away from for thousands of years, and I think it's a shame, especially around this time of year. Interestingly enough, is around the dark time, because people stopped working in the fields. They started, storing grain for the winter. They started storing food for the winter, and you basically had nothing to do. If you were in a farming culture, you didn't have anything to do in the winter. You don't wake up at 6 a.m. and go out until the fields anymore. So you sit around and you eat, and you drink, and you sit by the fire and you tell stories. And this was a way of not only hearing stories and entertaining, but they were also, like Aesop's fables. They were also ways of communicating deeper understanding of things that human beings go through. We all go through the same thing. We all are, born and become men or women, and go out into the world and overcome obstacles. We become fearful of things. We encounter all these things, and then ultimately we all meet our demise, one way or the other. And it's storytelling is a way of kind of helping children and even adults to kind of find this connection with everyone else. I mean, like, I think it's one of the reasons why Star Wars did so well, because George Lucas was able to convey this basic mythological theme, which is almost universal. The hero's journey of how we go through life. And Luke Skywalker wasn't just a man. He also represents women. It represented the human experience. And I think that this is one of the great things about storytelling. So if you enjoy writing and creating those worlds and putting those stories down, I mean, you're connecting to that thousands and thousands of years primal thing that people have done, and that is telling stories. And storytellers had a very high position in society, especially in the European tribes, the Celtic tribes, and even the northern tribes. The Germanic tribes, and what did they call them? You probably know, Animus. The term, the Falisés, the Scandinavian storytellers.
Oh, the cedar, probably.
The cedar. Thank you. Yes, yes.
The high witches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even magic was associated with storytellers, you know, like especially in Irish mythology, there's a story about the bard who was able to make boils appear on a king's head or a king's face if he wasn't treated right, because and that's a metaphor for, you know, if you don't treat your guests right, they're going to talk badly about you, and you know, it's going to spread, and people are going to find and hear about how awful of a of a what's the term called, not a guest, but you know, somebody who offers hospitality to another person. But anyhow, I hopefully you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why hospitality is such an important virtue and was spoken at length about by so many traditional peoples, because that your hospitality can sort of affects the general run of what everyone else is putting out about you into the universe. Excuse me. In terms of, hang on a minute. Yeah, if you're a bad host, that means that your other people are putting bad vibes about you out into the universe, and the universe is going to kind of reverberate with that. I mean, that's a little bit of the primary essence of magic, is what kind of ripples you set up around you. And so hospitality is one way of really setting up the proper ripples for all of your connections and all of your dealings to do well. And that even comes into things like ecology. If you're living sustainably with the land will continue to sustain you. And you're a good host for it, and it's a good host for you, and everybody lives. If you're a bad host to the land, you deplete your resources and everybody, you know, starves or whatever. So it's a basic principle of nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I mean, if you feel comfortable writing about things, I mean, I think that's really good, you know. And dream journals, oh man, it's one of the things that I've struggled with on and off. I try to pick it back up and do it, and I just can't get the hang of it. Because sometimes a lot of my dreams I just don't remember, you know, and then other dreams I do remember, and uh, you know, it's one of those things that I've struggled with on and off, is actually doing a proper dream journal. It's something that I should do, and I just don't. I tend to try and I try to tend to at least keep a magical journal of what I do, you know, because a lot of times when I go into ritual, I don't do anything in ritual. I just kind of go through the motions just to sort of keep it sharp in my mind. Or most of the time, I just meditate, you know. But the times that I do actually go into ritual to actually do something or feel inspired to do something, then I'll create a dream journal. Excuse me, not a dream journal, but a magical journal to write down various things, and then obviously leave a space down at the bottom for what might happen in the future. So it's a good way to kind of keep track of what's going on. Like, for example, if you do a ritual for money, let's say you do a money ritual, you know, and so you write down all the various aspects of um, what you did in the ritual, you know, what direction you were facing, what color candles you might have been using, what other various elements you might have been using, what the moon phase was at that time, what time of day, what time of the year, what was the weather like, how were you feeling, all these various little aspects. And you write them down, and then you also leave a space at the bottom, because if because at some point in the future you're going to find out whether or not that happened. And if you write down in your journal afterwards about what happened or what didn't happen, that can help you, you know, to kind of understand, okay, so if I do it this, you know, if I do it on a full moon rather than on new moon, or I do it during the day instead of at night, or I, you know, do this or I do that, or maybe you just didn't feel comfortable. Maybe you just weren't in the right headspace at that particular day and that particular time, but you did it anyhow. You know, you sort of forced your way through it, and then later on you find out, well, that didn't do anything for me because my head and my heart weren't in the same space. And so it just didn't work out because you were kind of going through the motions of it.
Yeah, and I think to some extent that helps you realize that it's okay that you're not always on your A game. You know, you have some days where, okay, this wasn't a great day, and it's not the only day that wasn't great, but not all. Some of the days are better.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see where that would work. I don't do any kind of journals really, but if there's something that comes up as a particular inspiration, or if something keeps coming back to me, I'll do a poem of it. And so I've got a number of poems, and that's something where I can like throw it out for someone else to think about, of something that has just been a recurring perception.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that's also something I can reread and say, yeah, at some point at this year, I reached this perception. And anytime there's a doubt about that, I can go and say, well, 1985, I wrote this poem about the dunes of truth. That's old hat. It's not something I have to revisit. It's something that I know I've got locked down. So that's a little bit of a journal. That's as close as I get to that.
Yeah, and some people don't even keep a journal, you know. So yeah, it's really up to you how it feels comfortable. But as far as okay, so since you brought it up, Leon, let's go ahead and talk about calling the quarters for a second here. Now, people have different ways of calling the quarters. This is the way I look at it. Like, if I'm going to, for example, if I had your phone number, Leon, or I had your email address, or I knew where you live, and I called you or emailed you or went over to your house, but I don't have a reason to call you, I don't have a reason to contact you, if I don't have a reason to do it, I'm wasting your time. So you can kind of think about it that way. Sometimes people go into ritual, but they don't need to call the quarters. There's no point to it because they're not doing anything with it. Like, you could think of, if I had a task for you, like if I said, hey, Leon, you know, I need some help with this. Could you help me with this? This is what I want done. Can you do it? Can you not do it? You know, but if I contact you, I have a purpose for contacting you. I'm not just contacting you just because this book says that I should contact you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with this? So
Yeah.
if you have a legitimate reason for actually going out of the way to call the quarters, and that of course calling quarters can mean various different things, different people, but I consider it to be an invitation of creating thought forms. And if I have a purpose for these thought forms that I'm going to send forth in the world, then of course it makes sense to call them. But if they're not really needed, there's no reason for me to call them and create them and manifest them into my circle. They're just not needed. So sometimes I'll, you know, if I do cast a circle and go into a ritual, but I don't need the quarters, I'm not going to call the quarters just to call them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There actually has to be a reason for it. And the same thing what you mentioned, the Lord and the Lady. Like, if you call the Lord and Lady into your space, into your circle, there's a reason for it. You're not just doing it just because you're following along. Again, what this ritual tells you, you have a purpose for them. You're inviting them there. You want them to be present. You want them to observe you, or maybe you want them to witness something, or maybe you just want them present to for a reason. There's a reason for them to be there. You're not just doing it just to be doing it. You know, sometimes there's certain liturgy that I will read that is part of my particular practice that I will do, but I don't necessarily need, I don't have to have the God and the goddess present. And again, to me, that means something completely different than it does to other people. But sometimes I just don't need to do that, you know? So it could be that what you're doing is just not necessary. And so maybe you just don't need to include certain elements all the time. You know, sometimes there's elements that I include that I don't include at other times. Does that, am I communicating myself well?
It does. You are, but I'm curious of what would be an example of a reason to call them.
Can I jump in?
Of course.
Okay. So, for example, not every problem has to have an entire planet thrown at it. And not every mystery is so mysterious that it takes the mind of an entire planet to solve it. If you're trying to decide, oh, hey, Stephanie's here. Sorry.
Yeah, I just saw that.
There are problems that you already know enough about. There are issues or mysteries that you already know enough to solve that do not require the weight of the universe to solve them. So you may not need, like there's plenty of stuff that I do in my practice where I may even go out into a forest, or I may go fishing, or I may be dealing with a person or explaining something to a person. And it's not a cosmic scale issue. I don't have to invoke the galaxy in order to discuss some little bit of cultural background. And so there's no reason to bug those levels of consciousness for the full potential of their inspiration, because I already know that material well enough. Thank you very much. It's not that hard, and B, it doesn't take that much force to move an M&M across the table or something like that. If it's just a little job, and some days are just about little jobs. There's nothing that comes up that's of cosmic consequence in certain days. They're just, okay, I went to work, I ate some food, I did some cooking. It doesn't take the full weight of the universe to solve every problem. I think when the point of regularly sort of dipping yourself into the consciousness of the universe, or calling, like, if I can comment on witchcraft, calling the quarters, that's for when you're letting those forces instruct you to some extent about you and about your path, so that you can stay oriented to the big issues. But there's a lot of little tasks come up that don't really require that much weight.
I have it. Sorry. I have a perfect example. I think it was in 2014, April 27th, and the EF4 came through our neighborhood. Thankfully, our house was roughly spared. And after we emerged from the bathroom, made sure we both were okay, I kneeled down and I didn't call them. I prayed to them to say, thank you for sparing us, and so forth. Sent a little energy to them. And throughout the night, there was another wave coming through. I felt safe. Now, would you consider, like, a natural disaster a reason to call the Lord Lady for guidance?
Actually, this is going to sound weird, but this is the shaman talking. A natural disaster is something that may be inappropriate to try to call cosmic forces down to change, because natural disasters are actually usually rebalances. If you try to counter an earthquake or a hurricane, you are attempting to fight against a rebalancing of nature. And it's a very selfish and narcissistic thing to do, because those things really do need to happen. So either you fail, in which case you're just chalking up a failure mark on your practice because you did something way over your head or tried to do. Or B, if you were in any way able to succeed, you'd just be setting up a greater imbalance that would have to correct later. So that's
actually before tornado, was like a favorite before tornado. I stepped outside and I went, this feels wrong. If the air outside, it felt wrong. Like, I'm not that sensitive when it comes to energy, but I was just outside, it's like, okay, something's going to happen here, and I don't want to be here when it happens. Is that possible, by the way? Animus, is that possible?
Is what possible?
That perception? Yeah, totally. Yeah. That this is why when there's about to be a volcanic eruption or a hurricane, all the animals have already gone for cover. Mm-hmm. They already got that message that it's not that it's wrong for the universe to do it. It's that it would be a really bad idea to be caught out in the open or under the trees at that point. What you really need to do is get the heck out of the way. That is you perceiving the universe telling you that it's time to look for cover, that there's a tornado coming and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's a matter of personal sensitivity. And it doesn't mean you're supposed to change it. It means you're supposed to get out of its way, because nature is about to talk in a big way. Nature is about to do a little shout.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we call them natural disasters, but it's just the way that things work. Volcanoes happen, earthquakes happen, floods happen, tornadoes happen. All these things happen. We find them very destructive and disruptive because we're trying to survive and live just like everything else. But it's just that's just how the earth works. Earth creates land by volcanoes. Plate tectonics move, and that's how we have earthquakes. There's a purpose for tornadoes. There's a purpose for flood. All these things have, they have a purpose, and even if they don't have a conceivable purpose that we can perceive, it happens. It's just a function of the world we live in. And I don't know, I'm kind of an asshole, but I think all of you know that, so I don't have to really defend myself. But it's kind of egotistical whenever people talk about weather magic and stuff like this. It's kind of like, why do you feel that you are so fucking important that like you can pray to a god and have the weather suddenly change just to save your house or whatever? It's kind of, we're a lot smaller than we think we are. Or excuse me, we're a lot smaller than we think we are. We think we're hot shit. We think that we're the world, the universe literally revolves around us. We think that the gods are going to drop whatever it is that they are in the middle of just to help us out. And it's kind of it's a pretty self-centered, egotistical point of view. And even if you could possibly change the course of weather, can you honestly think that that is in the best interest of not only yourself, but the entire ecosystem of the entire world? Is that really your place to stop a hurricane from happening just because it's going to save your house? Where you see where I'm getting with this, or where I'm going with this. It's a very egotistical point of view. It's kind of like, yeah, shit happens. We get into accidents. Bad stuff happens to us. We get fired. People treat us like shit. We die. We get diseases. All these awful things happen to human beings. It doesn't mean that if you believe in the gods, that the gods don't favor you and they favor someone else. It's just the way it is. That's kind of like, oftentimes you'll see like the fates or justice being blind. It's kind of like everything is dealt out to everyone. Nobody gets special treatment. The poor get sick, develop disease, and they die. The rich get diseases, they die. What were you going to say? Go ahead.
Whenever I torture myself, I was watching this pink-haired woman named Kat. If you ever decide to do a video on this, look up, her name is Prophetess Kat. She likes to pray away hurricanes, and I keep saying it out loud every time I watch that video. I'm like, the universe is indifferent to you. It doesn't give a shit about it. It could kill us all like that if it wanted to. And I'm like, by the way, her trying to control a storm using prayer, isn't that a form of magic? Ironic, because she worships God, but they're performing a very ignorant form of magic. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, another thing is, I've been feeling that same kind of imbalance lately that I felt in 2014. Now I'm like, not again. Not again. I'm like, do we have a plan? Do we have rations? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think you probably heard my position on the difference between magic and prayer. I know a lot of people see them as the same thing, and to a certain extent, I completely understand where they are coming from. However, I see a very clear delineation between the two, because if I am praying, for example, to a god or a goddess for something, I'm going through them, hopefully to have something happen. It's kind of like telling you, hey, Leon, would you pick that up? Would you pick up that pencil and hand it to me? And you say, sure. And you pick up the pencil and you hand it to me. To me, that's a prayer. If I'm praying to a god or a goddess and I'm asking them to do something, that's what they're doing. They're going out, they're doing it for me. I'm not doing it. Magic, on the other hand, is incredibly self-centered. It is your will. It is your mind. It is your influence doing what it is that you want to happen. You are going up and you are picking up that pencil, and you are then going to do whatever it is that you want to do with that pencil. You're not asking anyone else to pick it up. You're not asking anyone to help you pick up that pencil. You're doing it yourself. So that's how I look at magic versus prayer. Now, do they accomplish the same thing? Yes, they do accomplish the same thing. You're moving that pencil, however you want to move that pencil. So some people can say, well, essentially what you're doing is you're using your will to move the pencil. Yeah, it's true. You are, but you're just using it in another path. So it gets a little tricky, because I whenever I start talking about some of these deeper concepts, I find myself becoming hypocritical, and it doesn't bother me that it's hypocritical, because it's a way of perceiving things, is the best way to describe it. But you are doing you are accomplishing the task. It's just that maybe you're taking a different route to someone else. Instead of praying for something to happen, or instead of using magic to make something happen, you're praying to a deity to make something happen, but you're still causing something to happen, regardless of what you're doing. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay,
And
good.
I have a question for Animus. If I am, and this could just be me, my craziness, if I'm feeling the same instability I did that day, or the week before that day, should I be concerned that another storm is going to come through and just wreck shit? Or should I?
I think you got that's a perception you have to hone. But I think every time a tornado is coming by your house, you should have the good sense to get out of its way. Every single time. You should always get out of the way of tornadoes. And with more practice, you become more sure that that's the perception you're having. And it costs you nothing to get out of the way of a tornado that doesn't happen to come right through your house. You know, it's a matter of how you're hedging your bets. Because one of the things you can do is then you can tell somebody else, hey, dude, get out of the yard, come down in my shelter with me or something. You know, to some extent, as you become more sure of your perceptions, you're able to help other people. So yeah, I think it's good to pay attention to that, because for one thing, when you're first having those perceptions, there may be 10 different conditions that are setting that off. And maybe 2 of those conditions are actually relevant to whether a tornado is coming. But if you pay attention to them and you repeatedly pay attention to them, eventually you will settle on the conditions that actually mean tornado, and the conditions that just mean, oh, there's a low pressure front coming through and it might rain tomorrow. So it's always good to pay attention to them. And because a tornado there's never a non-dangerous tornado, you know, And so it's worth gauging your risk factors, or it's worth gauging your opportunities each time. And so you just have to refine that by reiteration over and over and over. This time I did this thing and it had this effect. The next time I do this thing, let's see what the effects are. And let's see how consistent you can make your efforts. Just like learning any other skill, just like learning how to hammer a nail. It's absolutely worth paying attention to over and over and over and over. I mean, that's the entire central theme of Zen mysticism is I'm going to shoot 10,000 arrows until I am so good at doing the things that work and avoiding doing the things that don't work that I hit the bullseye almost every time. Mm-hmm. So that is developing skill. That's not natural talent. That's something you do by paying. I often tell people to watch this video from Dr. Martha Beck, who is an anthropologist who studied shamanic peoples for 20 years. And she did a talk about magic people among traditional tribes. And I'm going to type the title of it that anyone who's interested who hasn't already can look up. But she said, you go around the world to these tribes and they say, oh, there's a magic person in our village. Go talk to the magic person. But when you actually go talk to the person, they say, magic my ass. It took me 25 years to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's
that's insane.
Let me just say, I think it was Einstein, who said genius. It's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Mm-hmm. And that's magical practice right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And it's like you were saying, Animus is kind of like, you have to screw up a whole bunch of times before you get something down, like athletes and professional ball players. I mean, they go through and they just have to continually train. But before that, they were fucking up all the time. They were doing it wrong. And then they figured out, oh, this is how I do it. This is how I do it. And you just, repetition. As you do things over and over again, you become good at it. You have muscle memory. You have hand-eye coordination, you have all these various things. The more you do something, the better you're going to become at it, And what were you going to say, Leon?
Oh, it took me back to weather real quick. It took me the majority of my life to learn how to read radar, sad as it sounds. But I think it was after the twist that came through that I looked at the radar at the hotel on my phone, and it clicked. I mean, it just clicked that it all made sense. My mom can't read radar very, very well to save her life. So to me, it just clicked. Every notch, color, design of the cells makes sense. Does that sound strange?
No, that's not. Yeah. Some things are going to come to you so easily it annoys you compared to how much work you have to put in to get just a little bit of advancement in something else. That's normal. That's just being human. Humans are generalists. We have a whole general batch of stuff that we could do, and some of it's going to be really easy and some of it's going to be really hard, but because we're made as generalists by nature, we have to deal with that variety of stuff, whereas another creature is really freaking good just by sheer nature and instinct at doing some particular thing, but they tend not to be good at anything else. They tend to be just good at that. And so creatures with general intelligence and general talent and general aptitude, some things are going to come easy, and you're going to think those things are less important, even if they are important. And some things are going to be really hard, and you're going to put too much importance on them because they may be necessary but trivial, but you're still going to have to work stupidly hard on them to get even the basics down. And that's normal. That is what humanity is. Dolphins are probably the same way. They're generally intelligent creatures. Raccoons are generally intelligent creatures. So that's you're going to have that in every aspect of your life, and it's going to be true of your magical practices as well. Some truly magical stuff is going to seem so obvious and natural that you don't see it as magic. You just think the universe works that way. Some aspects of healing were like that for me. Sympathetic healing of people's stresses and even some of their metabolic conditions were very natural for me from a very early age. And I literally did not understand that everyone couldn't do that. I thought, oh, if somebody's got this problem, you just, rub their shoulders a little bit, they're fine. Why doesn't everyone do that? Whereas other things like keeping track of the difference between a D, a G, a Q, and a P were incredibly hard for me. And I had to fight really hard to keep track of which way the stick was supposed to go compared to the circle. And that's just part of being a human.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah. I don't know what to say after that. So
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Going all the way down to animal psychology there, but
no, it's okay. It's just, yeah. I mean, I don't. Does that seem to help, Leon? I don't know. I don't know if it really helps.
It did.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I tell people to first look inside of themselves, because, it's. I look at my path as a very personal path, and it's something that's evolved for me over time, and that's all I can really tell other people. I can't tell people if paganism is going to be right for them. I can't tell them if Christianity is going to be good for them. I can't tell them that being an atheist is going to be good for them. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be good for someone else. I know what was good for me and how things worked for me, and that's all I can do. But obviously, I'm not you, and you're not me, and we're all different people, and we all have a different approach to everything. That's why I really tell people is to spend some time with yourself. Spend some time thinking about how you fit in the universe and what you think about it. Are there particular pantheons of gods that appeal to you? Are you like me and you don't see gods as actual manifestations of beings that have consciousness, but rather aspects of individuals that we have created over time? Like I don't look at trickster gods like, let's say, Loki and other gods like that as actual beings, but rather aspects of ourselves that we can tap into and that we can explore and that we can channel in a certain way, or even call into us. Whereas Loki's witch, she may pray to Loki, and she has a completely different relationship to that god because she approaches it from a different way than I do. So even though she and I may talk about the same quote unquote concept, we have a completely different relationship with it. I approach it from an internal aspect, and she may approach it from an external aspect. Obviously I'm putting words in her mouth because she's not here. But so that's one way to look at it. So you can look at your practice in the same way. Just find out what resonates with you, and find out what doesn't resonate with you. And maybe keep the things that resonate with you, and discard the things that don't resonate with you.
And don't be afraid to let it take a little time, because it will. In jiu-jitsu, we had this really short phrase, 10,000 ogoshis. Do the same thing 10,000 times. And somewhere along the way, it will become fairly natural and obvious, and you'll get it almost every time. But you need to be prepared to do it 10,000 times. So keep doing it. And that's why you practice an hour a day or whatever, because you want to get through that many iterations to refine your concept of it and how it relates to you. If you only practice once a year, it's going to take you 10,000 years to get to the same place that you could have gotten to in only 30 years by doing it once a day. And even if you do it every day, you should be looking at a 30-year time frame for getting to the place where you're supposed to be in the end. Or, you know, think that long term. Don't beat yourself up because, you know, Tuesday you did it 85% good, and Wednesday you did it 65% good, and Thursday you did it 90% good, because you will have days where you're brilliant and you'll have days where you're an idiot. And to some extent, the days that where you were an idiot can make better stories. The day I almost stepped on a deer was one of my best stories. It really was, because I did really good at tracking down stag spirit to the point where I almost stepped right on a deer. And so it was a genius inspiration day where I actually followed stag spirit, and I was a complete idiot because I almost actually stepped on one in the process.
Oh, I got a funny story for you, Animus. You'll appreciate this. So I love going up to Yosemite, like I had mentioned earlier, and I did things that you're not really supposed to do, and that was I went hiking by myself, which is something you really shouldn't do, but I did it anyway, and I got caught in this horrendous thunder and lightning storm. I mean, it was like, you count, like you would hear the thunder. It'd be like 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then you'd hear the lightning. And I was like, I would see the lightning, and I'd count like 1,000, and then the thunder would happen. It's like, oh shit, okay, it's very close. And I was around a lot of trees and everything, so I kind of got scared, and I was kind of like trying to get to this one place where I knew a little bit of a clearing where I could get some shelter. And as I was going along, this deer had sort of like the same idea. It was kind of running away from where it was. And I was on a path, and it was crossing my path, and we both just sort of stopped. And it was like maybe, I don't know, 6, 8 feet away from me. And we just kind of like locked eyes. And it jumped off in the opposite direction, and I went off in the other direction. It was just kind of like, it was like one of those moments. It's like, oh shit, we have bigger problems than just, the two of us here.
Right, exactly. The whole hunter prey thing really doesn't matter right now.
Right, exactly.
And that's where both of you realize you're part of a bigger nature in that way. It's like, no, okay. Usually we would have something else going right now, tornado or lightning bolt. Right, exactly. That is nature giving you some real perspective right there. I think that's why people seek extreme experiences like that. Mountain climbers do it on purpose all the time. They're always trying to say, okay, I'm going to measure myself against, the ultimate risk or the ultimate stupidity. And if I survive, I must be smarter than I think I am.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, now mountain climbing in, like, for example, Half Dome. I mean, there's so many people who've climbed it. You just use somebody else's whatever they call those things that they hammer into the stones. Because there's just so many people who have done it. If you kept hammering in new ones over time, it just destroys the whole face of the mountain. But you can use other people's whatever they call those clamps or whatever they tie the ropes to.
Pitons. Yeah.
Yes.
Pitons.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Those things.
Yeah. At some point, you're traveling well-traveled territory, but it's new to you. So you can go practice hammering pitons somewhere else. But yeah, when you're actually on the day, it's already there.
Well, I mean, if you can think about how many people have probably climbed, Half Dome. I mean, it must be thousands of people at this point, if not tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, you're not doing any groundbreaking work in terms of the world, but you're challenging yourself at your own level.
No. What I'm talking about is the environmental impact.
Yeah.
So if you have tens of thousands of pylons hammered into Half Dome over the years, I mean, it's insane. There's just too much there. It's damaging the face of Half Dome. So you can't hammer in new ones. You have to use the old ones. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the challenge eventually itself changes due to the number of people who've taken it.
Okay, yeah, I'm not expressing myself.
Yeah, unless you're just talking about ecological.
Yeah. I'm talking about the ecological effects of hammering in tens of thousands of pylons into stone. That, I mean, if you put a new one in every time you climbed it. Maybe I'm not expressing myself.
It's kind of over traveled territory at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's like at some point it's like, okay, little chips of Half Dome are going to start falling off because of all the pylons hammered into the stone.
Well, that happens with religions too. At some point, so many people have done the same meditation and said the same prayer that it starts to lose its meaning to some extent, and it kind of wears out.
I have something like that. I live not too far away from Pinnacle, and on the day that me and my friends are going to climb it, more trail, I saw trash on it. Thankfully, people would walk the trail and clean it up. But when I finally reached the top, I didn't care. I didn't care at all. As we were actually above the clouds, low lying clouds, not that high of the mountain. It was beautiful. For the short time we were up there, we heard thunder. Like, okay, we need to get off this rock. And I stuck my toe on the way down, and let's say that's the blood in the mountain. Let's put it that way. But yeah.
So where is Pinnacle?
Oh, Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
I live like right across the river from Pinnacle. It's visible where I live. But yeah, I went into climbing again, but not in the current shape I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more question. It's totally unrelated. During my high school years, I may have saw a ghost, or it was a vision of a weary brain. But does that mean my third eye is open if I'm able to see ghosts?
I don't know. Do you want to field this one, Animist? This sounds more like maybe along your lines.
What I've a lot of people have seen what they call ghosts. I have a lot of different phenomena that when people say they've seen ghosts or seen spirits, there's a lot of different things that people say they see that could fall under that category. Tying that to the concept of a third eye is something to do. It's not how I would put it, but it's a way to describe it. But some of these effects are easier to see than others, and they come from different. They have different explanations in different systems. So, I mean, to some extent, you can say, okay, I had that experience, and you can try to understand it the best you can. But until you have other experiences, it's hard to kind of put it in a frame of reference. But it's a sign that you saw something, and that's really from one experience. That's about all you can say.
I literally turned my head to face. It was a hallway. I had a hallway, bathroom, and a spare bedroom. Turned my head. This ghost peeked his head out of the bathroom, and then vanished. Literally, like half a second, and he was gone. I guess we locked. What if ghosts have eyes? Locked eyes, and then I turned my head. He was gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, since Animus kind of gave his point of view, I'll give you my point of view. As you know, I'm very practical and objective in my practice. And I don't believe. I'm sure you've already known this. I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in ghosts. Now, this is, of course, almost heretical to most other witches, but that's been my experience. That's how I've thought about it and how I've perceived it. So, if someone tells me that they've seen an apparition or a ghost or something to that effect, I I mean, first of all, they experienced it, not I. So that's their opinion. So whatever. If they claim it, then that's fine. That's their claim. Unless they're trying to take it any further than that, I really don't care. But I just don't see it. I could understand how possibly you could have the essence of a person maybe sit around for a certain period of time, but at some point they're going to evaporate or disappear into whatever it is that you believe happens to us after the afterlife. I believe in reincarnation. So to me, it makes absolutely no sense that you would have ghosts and apparitions and then you would have people reincarnating. It's like it's either got to be one or the other. Either our essence just doesn't die and it stays in some non-corporeal form for eternity, or we actually, you know, go on to, live in another summerland and then come back and reincarnate. I mean, honestly, the whole idea of what happens to us after death, I don't really have down. I have a lot of theories and ideas and concepts about it that seem practical to me, but I mean, I don't know how to test any of my theories or anything. So when people tell me that they've seen ghosts and apparitions, I honestly believe that what they're doing is they're perceiving that. There's something that they're projecting onto that. Or maybe, like I said before, a temporary thought form or a temporary uh, essence of a person. Like if you see somebody die and then you feel like you see their presence, maybe uh, coming out of their body or walking around or whatever, that I can understand because, okay, so their spirit left their body and maybe it exists for a certain period of time and then it is, reconstituted back to the universe or whatever. So, I just I'm if I see a ghost, and sometimes I've seen things that I believed were ghosts, but I don't think that they are in retrospect. I think that what it is that it was something that I saw and I perceived that way. But again, I mean, it has to be something that I feel makes sense. Now that's just me. And just because I have an opinion about something doesn't mean that it's right. It just means that that's my perception of it. And other people, like I've talked with people about the idea of ghosts and the afterlife, and they've had an explanation. They've had their opinion about how it is. And I've listened to them, and yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. I can see where they're coming from that perspective. And I think that that's why it's good that you have Animist here and myself, because like Animist gave his opinion about that, and I can kind of give my opinion about it, and our our opinions are not going to be the same. We're going to have a completely different approach to it, and it doesn't mean that he's right and I'm wrong, and it doesn't mean that I'm right and he's wrong. It just means that that's our opinion of it. That's our theories of it. That's what we've experienced. You know, and so that's my take on ghosts and apparitions.
Yeah, we had actually somewhere back in the live streams, we spent quite a bit of time trying to sort that out because we were talking about things like reincarnation and souls, and some of my ideas about them are that some of these experiences are just glitches in physics, and that a lot of these things aren't even a spirit, and you can't tell until except when you're in the first person and you're trying to sort it out. And so when you try to compare notes with someone else about any given experience you've had that they didn't have, there's no scientific way to make that comparison.
Mm-hmm. What's your theory on that, Leon?
I am still 12, 13 years later, still trying to figure that night out.
Okay.
But ironically enough, our where I live is there's a main graveyard and a several side graveyards. There's an old graveyard right up the hill where I live that was just recently marked. And I'm like, I'm surrounded by so many grave plots. And I haven't seen one. And since that night, I haven't seen a single spirit. So, I don't know. Of course, the graveyards and the older ones are consecrated ground, so that's probably why. But, like, there's this church, if my goal of the story, there's a church close to where I live. It's a very old town. That for the longest time, ever since I've known Bayflower existed, ever since I was a kid, has been locked, abandoned, for reasons that no one will speak about, and I probably don't remember. But recently, it was not right all, but there was during a pretty severe windstorm, one of the doors got blown off, and I poked my head into like, you know what? I'm pretty poking my head inside this abandoned old centuries-old church for no reason. And I could not stay within probably 5 minutes of the place. Like, okay, I need to get out now or something's going to happen. And I got back on the moped. I had to push the moped back home. It wouldn't, back up the hill, it wouldn't start. And I went, there's something bad in that church. I do not want to come here. I had to drive that church every single day. And my gaze is always drawn to it. And I was like, that church, something went down there. My morbid curiosity says, I want to find out. My sane side of my brain says, you don't want to find out. So, Annabeth, what do you think about that? Should I put my head back in there and find out what happened, or leave it the fuck alone?
I think you should face your fears. I mean, whenever we get into areas like this, there's so many conflicts that come up inside of me internally. Again, I take a very practical approach to my practice. I think you have to be balanced in everything. It's very much a part of the axiom of the Western occult tradition is to have balance. And I think it's really wonderful that the internet is here and we have this large community of pagans and witches and people with all these various opinions and ideas and concepts. And so we can all kind of come in here and watch videos and listen to people and join Facebook groups and follow people on Twitter, and we can hear their stories and we can relate and we can, all of these things is really wonderful because we have this opportunity to have and be introduced to all these new concepts and ideas and fun things to think about. But you have to stay grounded. This is what I have to do. I have to remain grounded. I can't let myself become too airy, up in wonderland, wandering around in conceptual, etherland where there's no boundaries, there's no nothing. I'm just, everything is okay. Everything is possible. That I just can't do. And on the flip side of it, I can't be so hardline that I can't open myself up to the possibility of things. It works both ways. I still have to keep a certain element of that childlike, whimsical approach to things, that, going out in the forest and playing with fairies type approach. you know, so they both have their extremes, their dichotomy. I don't know if dichotomy is a good word. They both have their polar opposites or their opposites. And so it's good to be balanced in both ways for all things. If I'm in circle and I see a spirit, or I believe that I see a spirit, I won't know until I actually approach that and find out if it is a spirit or not. Chances are, my experience, 9 times out of 10, what it is, actually 10 times out of 10, what it is it's my own projection, it's my own fear, it's my personification of something. I am placing that outside there, or I am putting that image or that projection out there. It actually doesn't exist. I'm creating it in that moment. And the moment I go up and face it face to face, I suddenly realize it's just a shadow. It's just something that is my projection. It's not actually there. It's actually not. Um, it's just something that I'm putting out there. Now, if I ever experienced something that was, in a sense, undeniable, like I actually felt something like possibly move through me, or I felt something touching me or whatever. I mean, if it was something that was very, very tangible, where I couldn't later on explain it away. And of course, this is going to meet a different level for every single person out there, because we all have different levels of reality that we can claim, you know, is a reality for us. Everybody has a different measurement for that. So, you know, that's what I would suggest, is just like, if it causes you fear or hesitation, go up, find out, touch it, you know, approach it, face your fears. All fear is just that unknown. And the minute that you actually come face to face with it and look at it, you're going to be fearful. But if you approach it and find out that, wow, that's nothing, you know, you're going to make it a bigger thing than it actually is, you know. And think about what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is mortality. We're talking about the fact that we understand that we leave this planet at some point. And to the best of my knowledge, none of us have any concrete answer to what happens to us after we die. We might have an idea of what happens. We might have concepts. We might not have our own beliefs, but we do not have a concrete, absolute, yes, this happens after we die. If somebody does, I think that that's fantastic. And they're going to make a great deal of money when they reveal this information to the rest of humanity. But to the best of my knowledge, none of us knows. So that is automatically a subconscious fear of ours. And so we can project that out there. But I don't know if that helps.
It does.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, go on, Animus.
I guess I'm a lot less helpful with those issues, because it's the whole range of it. I consider sort of part of liquid reality.
You're cutting out, Animus.
So with thing, and it made
Animus.
Animus, we can't even understand you. Try rejoining the Hangout, because you're roboting. And I'm gonna when he reconnects, I'll probably start to wrap it up a little bit. But what were you gonna say, Leon?
Oh, whenever I try to bring that old church up to get some kind of information on it, people either brush me off or won't talk about it. And my inquisitive side goes, okay, I lived through almost all my life. I don't know any of this explains history. What aren't you telling me? And I'm like, that's the reason maybe when it goes quick in the first place, to find out what the hell happened there. The roof is caved in, the place is crested, looks like everyone just went up and left the place on Sunday, and it hasn't been that.
Yeah.
So, go on.
Go ahead. No, I'm listening. Go ahead.
So I'm like, I don't know what the hell happened there. There are parts of this town I do not, that I won't even go near.
Yeah, yeah, but if you listen to all the words that you're using, you're there's you're kind of building it up a little bit, because what you're doing is you're talking about this place that's, it has mystery already. You don't know exactly what it is, and churches and graveyards and abandoned places, they already kind of have this mystique to them. We project onto them, especially churches and graveyards and abandoned places. It's like, why would somebody abandon a place? Why would they leave it? What was going on here? Why did they leave it? You can start. There's a lot of unknown there, and so you're kind of already bringing up a lot of questions, and so there's a lot of what's going on. I don't have the answer to this. It's mysterious, and you're already sort of creating that projection in your mind into that place by all the things that you're describing right there. So yeah, it would be difficult to go into this situation, go into this area that has already this kind of mystery to it, with this you're already kind of creating a mystery in itself. So when you approach it, yeah, it is going to seem mysterious and unusual, and a little bit of fear. It's going to be fearful for you, because you're already putting that into it. So, you know, I mean, I like I said before, I'm just very practical, and I face I hate to say that I face my fears, because that's not exactly true. But I when I'm afraid of something, I try to face it. I think that is the best way to describe it. There's a lot of things that I'm afraid of that I'm just not going to do. But there are some things that I have been afraid of, and I just sort of need to face those fears and get through them, you know? And it's not like fear goes away. It doesn't. It's still present, but you sort of you bring fear with you into situations, and then you find out, oh wow, that's nothing. There's nothing to be afraid of here. You know, there's no there's no evil spirit there. There's no nothing there. It's just my projection onto that situation. So okay, so talk for a second, Animus. Let's see if we can hear you.
Okay, I reconnected. Am I coming
Much
through?
better. Much better.
Much better.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah, my connection basically dropped to YouTube and to Google, so it's just a little internet thing.
Yeah.
Having me talk about either fear or ghosts is apparently antithetical to the internet. It's like, who is this asshole? Cut him off. He is not helping anybody.
Oh shit, he's talking that shit again. Let's cut him off.
Weirdness of the universe will intervene.
First he's talking about gendered squirrels. Now he's talking about spirits. But anyhow, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Animus. You have the floor.
Hang on, I'm still getting the windows caught up. How far did we get? What were we talking about?
So Leon, do you want to kind of summarize your question earlier?
My last couple of minutes were all choppy and robotic.
Yeah.
Okay, there's this old church that I'm currently looking up, trying to find the history of it. I can't find jack shit of it. Old church that's been decrepit, run down, abandoned for, I can understand, 200 or 100 years. That very recently, after a severe storm, one of the doors burst open, and I tried to pop my head in there, and I felt this, I don't want to say negative, but a lot of old energy, because it's been sealed for over a generation. It's 100 years, a century. Yeah, century or so. And I guess I was just overwhelmed. Because a lot of this negative old energy just built up. But I put my head for like 5 minutes and said, I can't be here. And the whole stereotypical thing of technology fails, they're around a lot of energy. My phone was malfunctioning, my moped wouldn't start until I got a good distance away from it. What do you think about that, Animus? Should I put my head back in there and face my fears?
Well, see, you're doing should questions again. What should you do? It's putting it in a moral thing. I mean, to me, that's just part of the way the universe works. It has weird moments, weird places. I mean, okay. Here's the crazy shaman point of view. Is there a point to that? Is there a point for you to explore that environment or explore that fear, or is it telling you to stay out of the way of a tornado? That's what you got to decide. Are you meant to, or are you equipped to, or are you ready to deal with whatever that perception is? Because I mean, I go into places that have that kind of energy and I think, oh, well, that's the kind of energy it has. But I'm also this weird guy who grew up dealing with that kind of energy, So I know the answer for me. The answer for me is I kind of don't care unless it's affecting something else. But I do perceive that those kind of events are going on. The question is that relevant to you in some way? Because you can be real brave about sharks and get over your fear of sharks and you can get your leg bit off. You know what I mean? You can get over your fear of tornadoes and end up dead or whatever.
It's more of a curiosity than anything. Every time I drive by almost every day, my gaze is drawn to this place. Like, it's almost like a magnetic pull that I'm resisting every single day. It's like it's drawing to me there. Hell, like last year, I go by church. I saw 3 ravens standing on the church's roof. It's obviously drawing me there, but I know mentally I'm not prepared. I couldn't stand 5 minutes in that place before I had to leave. So
okay, so
just for a point of clarification, when I was talking about facing your fears, I mean sharks, tornadoes are real. I was talking about like stuff that you perceive that cause you fear. You would approach those and face those. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, it's unlikely that anything that's going on there is going to cause you physical harm unless it causes you to behave in a way that you cause yourself physical harm. I guess my question was, you have to decide what the point of the lesson is. You have to decide, you need to go into a situation like that if you insist on exploring that experience. You need to have a clear picture of some kind as to what it is that you're testing. Are you testing your ability to tolerate the presence of that environment? Are you testing your ability to withstand the sense of weirdness in yourself? Are you trying to refine a perception and come up with some real answer to what's causing it? I mean, those are the things you need to figure out what you're there to learn, because you're not going in to figure out whether the spirit world exists or whether the universe has weirdness in it. You can pretty much guess that there's some weirdness in the universe that isn't scientifically explained yet, and it's going to cause you to have feelings. So the question is, what are you going to learn by going in there? And there's no answer that I could give you right now from here that say it's definitely this lesson or it's definitely you're learning this perception or something. You need to figure out what the point is of testing that. Because once you do that, once you figure out what you're there to learn for or what you're there to understand, then you at least have something that you can go in and understand about it. Otherwise, you're just chasing yourself in a circle. You're chasing a tale of fear just to experience it again, like riding a roller coaster over and over. Maybe you're just, there could be any number of purposes to it. So that's where you need to do your meditation. That's where you need to look for your inspirations or your spirit guides, or do whatever, practice whatever arts you need to practice to prepare yourself to learn something from the experience. Because until you do that, until you do some kind of clarification on what the point of the exercise is, you won't be able to learn anything from it. You'll just go in and go, whoa, it's scary, and then go away again. And, as a roller coaster ride, okay, it's an experience, but you haven't learned anything or developed any skill. So my recommendation would be to figure out what the point of it is, because then you can actually have some kind of progress with yourself. So that's my, and it comes off as incredibly practical and cynical and whatever, I'm not that far from where Hellbound Heathen is on that. There's got to be a use to it. If there's no freaking use to the feeling, then it's just a feeling. You might as well watch a dramatic movie or, ride a roller coaster, because you're just soaking yourself in a feeling. It's porn. It's spirit porn.
It's emotional porn.
No, it really is. But you can cause yourself all kind of psychological disorientation by overindulging in spirit porn, and people do that. I think, and it can actually aggravate the situation, which is why I always say, if you need to have an exorcism, don't send in a priest, send in a shaman. Priests almost just make it worse, because they engage in the storytelling with the spirits, and they encourage them to, be demons. Whereas a shaman would go in and go, I've had this discussion actually before. Shaman goes in and goes, this is inappropriate behavior, fuck off. And the situation's just over, because someone has come in who's actually supposed to deal with necromancy. You're talking about necromancy. Priests are crap at necromancy. People who are shamans are much better at necromancy. Priests are better at rituals. Priests are better at culture transmission and educating the young. Shamans are a little too weird for that stuff, but we're pretty good at dealing with the dead. And mostly what we tell them to do is shut up and behave. Yeah. And they generally do.
Yeah. And then you get people like me who's like, no, it's not an exorcism. The person's just acting out.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the case.
There's no spirits. There's no devils inside this person. They just want attention.
Right. And sometimes that's legitimately the answer. Sometimes it's just a brat child or someone who has gone neurotic due to over-concentrating on some traumatic point in their life. And, maybe there's a difference. Maybe there's not. You can only go on a case-by-case basis. But you do need to know what you need to learn there. You have to treat that as scientifically as you would treat anything else. You need to go in and say, this is what I'm here to discover. And if you can't discover anything from that, but you're still having the feeling, or you still don't know what's going on, then you need to go back to your meditations. You need to go back to your whatever you do, your divination, and try again to figure out what you're supposed to learn from that experience. But the fact that you had a spooky experience doesn't help anybody, especially you.
So we went over our time. I was going to have this till 2 hours. Actually went into 2.5 hours, but it was okay because it was nice. It was really nice to catch up with both of you, because like I said, I feel bad about not uploading a video this month. It's just been one of those months, and I have a couple that I made a post on Patreon. Hopefully you guys got the emails on it, but just saying that sorry that I haven't been making videos, and I'm going to be getting back into it in October. I had got some videos on the back burner. But so it was good
I didn't make a video this month either, man. So I'll try to do better in the future.
Yeah, you should do better. Be better.
As soon as I stop moving every 3 months, I'll probably be able to get something together. But I just got here, and I'm probably going to move. I'm probably going to move again in another couple of months. So hopefully, when I get set up there, I'll be able to do something with this whole YouTube thing.
Sounds good. What were you going to say, Leon?
Maybe in a future video, this have return to the call, if you know what I mean.
What'd you say?
With the return to the call. Maybe you find some crazy pastor or some crazy nut job who you could ask them where the evil pagan touched them or however that goes.
Oh, the doll. Yeah. I'll have to work that in. I'm actually working on a video on Hampstead, which is which was an accusation that happened in England fairly recently, actually. And the channel that I've been doing a response to is Through the Black, but this guy wants me to do it. I mean, this is what I perceive from him. He's out of work. He's desperately really trying to push his movie, and they've created a whole website, and he's making this whole push about the Hampstead case. And I'm sitting there going, I feel like I'm walking into a trap. It's like the weirdest sensation. It's like, and so I don't want to do a response to it because I feel like I'm like playing into his hand so that he can sit there and say, you see, he made this video on me. They're persecuting us. I'm on it. I know about what's going on Hempstead. So I feel like I don't want to play into his hand. So I'm kind of holding off on this video, but I don't know. So anyhow, I'm sharing with you my internal struggles.
Hey man, if it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to do it.
No, I know. No, I mean, I know. I'm gonna see. I might also just approach it from a different angle and kind of cut him out of the picture, and just say, here's the facts of the case. This is what is going on. Here's where we can find out more about that, and just leave it very cut and dry. Because in most of my videos, I do like a video response. Like I listen to the person, I stop it, and then I respond, and then I play it again. This video might actually just be more kind of like a documentary talking about it. So it's a new format for me. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. So
have you become such a good debunker that it's like a badge of honor to get debunked?
I wish. I don't know. That would be interesting. I wonder if that's the case, but I don't think so. I mean, I'm really small compared, to most of the people on YouTube. I have less than 3,000 subscribers. I mean, there's people out there that like tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands of subscribers who do video responses to people that they would probably much prefer would do a video response because it would give them more exposure. But I mean, I don't. To me, it's just it's also another thing that I'm struggling with because I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. And, after a while, it's just kind of like, how many more ways can you say it? You can only say it like a couple of different ways. You're wrong, period,
Hey, Hellbound.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I see you changed your intro. I remember your old intro, your wide open intro, the sword, staff, pinnacle.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to revive that intro, or are you going to keep the same from their current intro with Ace card?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like to play with it. I like to do new things. That's my Coven's logo, my old Coven, the one that essentially I created. And so that was my Coven's logo. So that's kind of like how that came together. And then when I changed my channel name to Hellbound Heathen, I felt like because I also changed my avatar, I felt like I had to change the intro, I had to change the background, I had to change everything. But I mean, I do it's kind of like a nod back to those old days, like Animist people who've been following me for a long time. There's certain elements that I would like to throw back in there so that people like that can know. Like I know Animist enjoyed the background that I had of the witch burning, of the guy holding up the cross and the ladies strapped to stake, and they're going to be burning her. And that was the background that I used when I used a green screen, and I had that old intro. And now I changed the background to just that Hellbound Heathen. And I like to throw those elements in every so often. And so I probably will try to throw that intro element back into it, but it might not be that same one, but like an updated version of it, if that makes. I mean, you might have seen one of my videos where I threw that in there, but it was the more updated version of it. I just like to play around and throw new elements in there. You know, have some fun with it.
I also know that you like to throw in incubus, succubus music videos in your videos as well.
Yeah, I like them a lot.
You always come up with cool stuff. You play around with it all you want. You know, whatever seems cool to you is probably cool enough. Yeah, it's fun to get a little variety.
Yeah, exactly. And I figure if I enjoy making content, other people who maybe enjoy my style are going to enjoy it. You know what I mean? Instead of me trying to create something that I think people are going to like, I'm just like, fuck it. I'm just going to create what I like. And the people who like it are going to stick around. The people who don't like it are going to, they're going to go on to something else. So that's the way I figured. Rather than trying to please everyone, I'm just going to please the people who actually enjoy the same stuff that I enjoy. It just seems a lot easier to me because you're not going to be able to please everyone. It just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, you might as well follow your own vision. I mean, it's a labor of love anyway. So you might as well follow your own vision because you're going to do better work when you do that.
Absolutely, Animus. I 100% agree with you. And I can't wait till you start making stuff.
Yeah, I actually have to get some tall boots and some protective clothing to do the forests around here because we got all the nasty toxic creatures. Apparently, one of my sisters has been filling me in on all the ways there are to get poisoned in the jungles of South Carolina. So I'm like, I think I better get something other than tennis shoes and cargo shorts to explore the woods around here, at least until I figure it out for myself.
Yeah, but and also some of the people who are in the chat, like Loki's Witch and Stephanie, you should go and check out their channels too because they do. Like I know Loki had like a class that she was doing for people, and it was really interesting because she was talking about. I think she had a tarot class for a little while, and then she was talking about very aspects of her approach to her practice. She has kind of like a more Norse witch practice, and Stephanie has some good stuff. She's done she actually did a recent book review of Thorn Mooney's book, which was really good. And she does a lot of kind of instructional review type stuff, and she also does some rants too. So that's another great thing about YouTube is there's just so many people out there who just have different styles and approaches to various things. So, but anyhow, I'm going to start wrapping this up. So thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your support. And I'm going to, now that I've got my new job out of the way, got through the first month of training, feeling a little more confident that I can kind of relax a little bit and start goofing off a bit. I'll start making some more videos. So,
yay.
Yeah. And cool. All right. Good night, gentlemen. I will see. I'm going to try to have a hangout this Saturday too. So we'll see how that goes. But I'll post it beforehand. So if you don't see anything like an hour or half an hour before 7 p.m. Pacific time, chances are I'm not going to have a hangout. But if you see something posted, I will have a hangout. I'll try to give an hour's notice.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks for holding it, man. It's always a lot of fun, and we get some interesting people in here. Definitely. So I had a good time.
All right.
So we'll see you next time around.
All right, Animus. Night all. Night, Leon.
See you guys.